They serve, one administration after another. They may or may not rotate out into the private sector, into some of these big corporations that are now feeding off of the lifeblood of our federal government.
This is Sean Stone, filmmaker, actor, journalist, and son to legendary director Oliver Stone. In this episode, we talk about growing up in the film industry.
Just to get people to wake up to the fact that there's power structures that are behind the scenes, and the mainstream media is hiding it from you. As a kid, I got to see it firsthand, the dream machine that is Hollywood and media, right?
His personal politics.
That means I'm not part of the Republican Party. I believe in the Republic more than I believe in democracy.
And spirituality.
At a multidimensional level, I just look at it like, yeah, there's dark forces, there's resistance, there's opportunities for, through resistance, there's opportunities for our growth.
If you're not already following Sean, check him out. He covers independent media, global politics, and deeper spiritual ideas. And if you're new here, this is the Bali Bites podcast, where we talk real freedom, financial, physical, and mental. Let's get into it. I find it very hard to explain to people like where I stand kind of politically, like when you're talking to people left and right, and especially coming from the film industry myself. I know you've lived in it your whole life pretty much, but like trying to explain to somebody where I stand is very hard because I'm not like really left or right. How do you really describe yourself?
I think on Patrick Bet-David's show, I said I'm a constitutional Republican. So that means I'm not part of the Republican Party. I believe in the Republic more than I believe in democracy. I think that there's a clear distinction between a democratic republic, or again, we all understand the problem with democracy. We've seen examples of it throughout history. There's almost a prejudice in the sense of the idea that, if the majority of people, take any sample size, it could be a majority, could be 40%, could be majority, not even 50%, 35% could be majority, depending on how, on the issue. And if a majority of people think something, we as are meant to be sheep are supposed to concur with that and say, well, that's the majority will, right? And we obviously know what that creates. That creates wars, that creates mob tendencies. It creates, how do you say, it thrives on sensation and fear and mania. So, the beautiful thing to our Constitution is that it really stipulates the majority of the power. In fact, not only is it rooted in the individual, the power of every human being in our Declaration, being pronounced as created in the image of, well, the Bible says created in the image of God, and the Declaration basically says, that God has given us these rights, right? And these pursuits in life. And so in the Constitution, it says, well, whatever is not mandated for the federal government, it's reserved for the states and the people therein. So I tend more towards libertarian values, as far as letting people have as much freedom as possible to discern, to live their lives. And you could say that when it comes to like law, natural law practices, really is saying, if there's no victim, there's no crime. If there's self-harm, that's a moral judgment, right? That's something where we can certainly hope that communities can come together and people can support each other and have compassion for each other. But the idea of, really natural laws, there needs to be a victim to have crime. And crime should be weighed, as in our system, in a way, in an ideal system. Obviously our system is good. It's not perfect. There's a lot of corruption, as we know. There's a lot of bias. There's money that circulates that always corrupts everything. But the principles of how do you say, of justice in our system is, hopefully weighing the intention, right, of somebody when it comes to crimes. And so, I see a system that, unfortunately, our republic has, as any government will, right? It's, as even our founders understood, they're not run by angels. So you end up with entrenched bureaucrats, what we call the deep state, right? That
Mhm.
that are not elected officials, and they serve, one administration after another. They may or may not rotate out into the private sector, into some of these big corporations that are now feeding off of the lifeblood of our federal government, which has put us into 40 trillion plus of debt. And because it's obviously spending a lot of money in places that I think most of us can't even fathom. In fact, Elon Musk tried to get in there and do some analysis, right, accounting, and realized he was up against an establishment that didn't want to change its ways. And who knows if it's possible to audit, a Pentagon, for example, an IRS, a Federal Reserve, all these things that are just they've spent so many trillions, and again, it's just all this mystery of waste. So going back to the original federal conception, I think was a limited federal government and an overall, appreciation of limited government because our founders had just fought an empire, and I think wanted to maximize personal freedom. So going back to constitutional Republican, limited government, and not expecting that government's expending. I mean, look, I'm in a state like California where the government is now in debt and deeply in debt, and has proven, the futility and waste of so many programs, of so much spending. And it goes back to this idea, I think, a lot of people have pointed out throughout time that this kind of modality of we'll trust the government to take care of it is almost like, saying I'm a child, let the grown-ups take care of it for me, right? Even though the grown-ups have not proved themselves to be mature or to be um, dependable or reliable or accountable. And so, yeah, I think at heart, I prefer limited government, which Republicans are supposed to want, but frankly, they spend just as much as the Democrats when they get into power, it seems, at least in the federal levels. And there's a lot of corruption, as we know, in politics. So it's very difficult to align yourself, to any political party when both are equally corrupt and corruptible. So I may like particular people more than others as personalities, but always looking at them as criminals. So it's like, you know, do you like Tony Montana better, or do you like Michael Corleone better? I mean, which criminal do you like?
Yeah,
Take
yeah.
your pick.
I hear you. I try to like I feel like the easiest way to describe myself is like I just say like sort of libertarian leaning, but going back to what you said about like as long as there's no victim, like there like personal freedoms, but I find that there's a lot more people on the left that are pushing their thoughts. Like they cannot allow you to have your own opinion. If you say, well, this is what I think, that they can't just let it be that way.
Yeah.
And I found that when I moved to LA maybe 8 years ago. So I was in New York for a long time, and then in Asia for a long time, and then I came to LA. And when I first got there, I was like, I'm a liberal, of course, like that's what I am, like. And then the more I hung out with more people in the film industry, I was like, oh, I'm not necessarily like you guys, and so like my eyes kind of got.
What were the points of distinction? What would you say? What were some of the points of distinction that you felt between yourself and those in
Well,
film?
I mean it was a slow burn for me, but I think for me, well, the turning point was when the MAGA hat kid. I don't know if you remember that there was a.
Justin Smollett, Jesse
No,
Smollett.
no, no. Before that, or was it after that? Or before that, there was like a kid who was wearing the MAGA hat, and he went to some sort of like retreat type thing, or it was maybe it was in D.C. But there was the Native American guy beating the drum, and so CNN was saying
Oh,
that
right.
this smug kid was like in this guy's face, and you
Yes,
know,
provoking a fight or
and
something, instigating a
and I
fight.
remember everyone that I knew was just like posting like "fuck that kid," and and
Yeah.
I'm like, wait, he's just a kid. Like, what's with all the hate towards like I didn't I didn't know much of the story, and I was like, can we just wait to see what the full story is. And then as that kind of came out, I was like, all right, you guys are a little too much. And that was
Mm.
kind of the start for me. So I was going to ask you, were you like always kind of thinking the way that you are now, or did you have a turning point as well?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's an interesting point. I mean, I grew up with my father who tended to be more, Democrat, but my dad, I think like my dad is more of a contrarian, right? So he voted for Reagan the first time, um, and then turned on Reagan because of the Iran Contra stuff. I mean, my dad made Salvador in 85, so he saw what our foreign policy was doing in Latin America, for example, right? And, perpetuating death squads and basically supporting death squads and things like this, right? And this right
Mhm.
wing, real fascist type of governments, people use fascism all the time now. It's a joke. If you don't agree with you, you're a fascist. It's like, well, no, like there's actual fascism, and then there's, kind of
Everyone's a
conservative
Nazi
values that
these
you don't
days.
agree with, right? Exactly. Not everybody's a Nazi. I remember, but growing up, just hearing that rhetoric all the time, starting, in the 90s with Saddam Hussein is compared to Hitler, and then it was Milosevic was the new Hitler, and then, Saddam Hussein was again the new Hitler, and then Bin Laden was the new Hitler, and it was like all this comparison. Just
Mhm.
come on, guys, you have no history. It lacks historical analysis to just keep repeating the same. It's like a meme, just keeps repeating over and over, and you get tired of it. So I
Now
grew up.
Trump's the new Hitler. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's been the new Hitler, I guess, the last 10 years. But
Yeah.
the point being that I grew up from a perspective of a father who was contrarian. My mother was socialist. So I certainly understand, like, I was intrigued, as a young person. It's like you're interested by socialism because it makes sense. You never had to pay for your own bills. So it's like, yeah,
Mhm.
that model seems to work, right? Your parents take care of you. So the
That's
government should
pretty
do the same.
interesting. So your mom's, is she still socialist, or is that
I would say she would identify as such.
any?
Um, and so essentially, yeah, it's like when you're young, you kind of you can fall into the idea of socialism. But I was highly skeptical of the government because of my father. So you can't do both. You can't be both a socialist and highly skeptical of the government. Just
Yeah.
ultimately, it's like, well, yeah, our government's super corrupt. But if they were angels, then yeah, it'd be fantastic if we just let them take care of as much as possible, right? And let them take care, run our really manage our lives and our and our and money and everything to that effect, right? But once the government's corrupt, highly corrupt, and you see the foreign policy, you see how much it's tied up with business interests, right? Major corporate interests and whatnot. Um, it's all interlinked to the financial level. I mean, look at Epstein. It's like he's like a little glimpse into that
Yeah.
world of how major finance ties in with you know uh, tech, with government, CIA and Mossad type of intelligence work. And this is what I studied, at college. I did my thesis on the New World Order because I was studying Henry Kissinger's mentor, who was likewise kind of a power broker to an extent. He was very connected to the Rockefeller brothers. He was advising presidents. He had a CIA office.
And when was this? This was
So this was
the,
I don't know, 2006, 2005,
okay.
six. So the point is that I always had an interest in history and the question of power, understanding that there's more ideal conceptions of how we can wield power, and then there's realism of how power gets utilized. It's like courts. It's like, great, you have the law on your side. Now, what army is going to back it up? And that's reality, right?
Mhm.
So all these idealists, I appreciate idealism. I think one day we can hopefully achieve it as humans, to become more empathetic and conscious, to the place where we can operate more from ideals. But right now we're still in a place where you and one army, basically, right? Just like school kids understand, oh, you know, great. That's all well and good until you get punched in the face. So, uh, yeah, I would say that my job has been across these years has been more of a critic, you could say, a critic of policy, of trying to unearth certain conspiracies, things that are just not to say like I know it all, but just to get people to wake up to the fact that there's power structures that are behind the scenes and the mainstream media is hiding it from you. I think that's kind of the heart of what I've been working on for these decades because as a kid, I got to see it firsthand, the dream machine that is Hollywood and media, right? And how important it is to decide what morally am I, morally to have the courage to tell stories that, at least present a little bit more depth, a little bit, darkness to them, right? Because we're not dealing with angels here. And I think, my father was willing to look at a lot of topics from an edgier or a darker perspective, right? You can really look at his cinema as like kind of the dark side, the dark side of football and the corporate corporations, and money in the world of sports, and as a metaphor for like, for the mass the mass globalization of corporations at the time. Um, he's looking at media and American glorification of violence and the sex violence of natural born killers, for example, right? And that time frame of the 90s where it was at the beginning of reality television. He's looking at the dark side of obviously the Vietnam War itself was dark, but he wasn't glamorizing it, turning it into heroes where it's like, oh, you go to war, bravo, you're a great man. It's like, you go to war, you're oftentimes, fucked up or you're about to get fucked up. And it's not it's not a glorious, amazing thing. So again, like, he was willing to look at the dark side of things. And I think that helped to shape my psychology of then analyzing, events in world history and just the nature of reality.
How do you guys tend to agree more, you and your dad, and how about with your mom now? Because I know in my family, I'm the black sheep completely. Like everyone else is completely aligned with like, fuck Trump, fuck the Republicans, and like, ICE is the devil now, and they're like it's like and I'm crazy apparently to my family just for even like questioning
Yeah.
things.
I mean, I think I tend to look at things more as systems and patterns. And so I feel like I don't get as riled up. That's the main thing that distinguishes me from maybe my parents. I remember multiple times in the last years, even though, my dad at some points will, you know, be happier with what Trump's doing. And then other times will be like, this guy's about to start World War III and, freaking out. And I'm just like, you know what, just be cool, be cool. Like there's a much bigger game at play.
Yeah.
There's much, there's an aspect of brinksmanship. There's an aspect of personalities, but a lot of this is just systems. A lot of what we see is just tip of the iceberg kind of stuff, as we know. Like what gets put out in the press or in the media is really just what, as FDR even put it, if it happened in politics, it was meant to happen that way. Essentially, it was meant to. How do you say? It was a conspiracy to put it out in such a manner, to get people to believe things, right, and to think things. And I'm just not really that kind of person that gets too riled up by what's being presented to us. I get more riled up by what's not being presented, by being what's hidden. When you get a conspiracy that's at work, that gets me more excited. It's like, wanting to shake the cage and rattle the cage until, something spills out, right? Until something breaks. So what comes out on the surface level doesn't really excite me particularly. I may have some opinion about it, but I don't get as excited about what's on the surface. I get more interested by what's underneath.
Do you find yourself at odds with Hollywood? Because I know you're making films and your dad's also making films. So do you find that if you're not aligned with them or agree with them, it's a little bit more difficult to get projects done or made, or how have you found working in that area?
I don't like to get into like the psychology of them. I mean, to me, it's, the universe is all my dream. It's only my experience and consciousness. And the more we give into like an idea of them, it's all disempowering psychology, you see. So, at a multidimensional level, I just look at it like, yeah, there's dark forces, there's resistance, there's opportunities for, through resistance, there's opportunities for our growth. We learn, we learn from challenge, we learn from defeat, we learn from setbacks. All of it teaches us greater patience, greater humility, and also, like, to trust the process, to understand that if it's not happening, it's not because of them. It's God's universe. I believe that, the light, how do you say it? The source of all creation is not dark or light, right? It's both. I mean, there's light is the essence, but it's gonna cast shadow in this realm. So we are in a realm of shadow. Okay, how can we, learn to work with the shadows? It's like shadow boxing. You gotta use it. You gotta use the shadows to become stronger, become better, become more adept. And I never looked at Hollywood as an adversary. I don't know. I just don't necessarily fit into it. I never really fit into it. I don't think my father really felt like he deeply fit into it. He, he's had his own trouble and struggles over the years, and a lot of people have. Who've, no matter how much success they've had, there's still how do you say? There's still a lot of things that are just at work that are beyond our understanding, right? And so, yeah, I don't look at it like some behemoth that I'm up against. I just look at it as, okay, I'm in my process, and it's more God's will than some studio executive or some actor or even myself. That's the way I look at it.
That's a good way to look at it. I came out to Bali to get away from LA for a while, and it's been a good escape, I guess. Yeah, it's good for my soul, I guess. But how do you unplug? Like, what's your like? I notice you're very spiritual. You're in I've seen some of your posts. Like, you've done some ayahuasca stuff. Is that right? Or like what?
You
How'd you
sure?
get in?
Sure. I've done ayahuasca a number of times over the years. I've done iboga. I've done worked with kambo and
My
snake venom. And
my
yeah,
my
I think
my
the earth elements are interesting to me.
my girlfriend is Brazilian, so like they do the ayahuasca ceremonies like once a month. I think her parents do it like once a month or something. Like they're
Mm.
they're into that. I haven't done it myself, but yeah. What's your have you always been kind of spiritual, or what's your journey there, I guess?
I think everyone is spiritual. They just may or may not be aware of it. Spiritual of how deeply spiritual we are as beings. Some people are more material in terms of how they prioritize things. Let's say, but I think that in my case, I became aware of spiritual practices at a young age. Starting with meditation, I think when I was probably like 7, 8 years old, my dad became a Buddhist. So I became aware of, like, obviously I knew about prayer, but meditation as like a daily practice of tuning in, um, sitting with patience. I think that was the hard thing for me. I think to this day, I mean, it's funny because we're such an age of now of immediate gratification, thanks to the smartphones, the internet, um, these tools that can connect us instantly with people around the world, and ideas and stimulations, right? So going back to when I was a kid, it was like we had to sit with boredom. It was a great, it was frustrating, but it was something my dad always urged when I was young, was like, be bored. Just, let boredom prompt creativity, allow it to inspire. Um, you can create games, you can write. So I started when I was a kid. I would start writing. I wrote my first short film as like 7-year old. We played board games, we played memory games, things like this, right?
Hmm.
Then obviously it made it even more fun when you had friends to play with, so that when I was buying it myself, maybe I'd play with toys, or later on video games, but mostly it was sharing the ability to play, games together, play, yeah, video games together, but oftentimes, football and basketball and all this, all the physical activities to run around and play tag. It was like really appreciating the company of our friends. And so again, I think all of this is meant to say, like, when you sit with boredom, you start to tune into your emotional body. You get ideas, your imagination can kick in, and that's the beginning to understanding the spiritual realm, right? Because it does tie to our imaginations. It's not visible, right? Our dream states, our imagination, these are invisible things that we are working with all the time. Our mind, we don't see, we can see a brain or whatever, we can see a body, but we can't like materialize what's in our mind. So you're already dealing with the ethers. You're already dealing with spiritual things when you work with the mind and when you work with visualization that comes through.
Now I've heard people think that like thoughts come from someplace else, or like, when you're being creative, you're kind of tapping into some other
Sure.
realm. Do you believe that, or do you think
Yeah.
yeah?
I think we channel. Yeah, I think we channel. Most creatives, you go into a hypnotic type of state, and I know it when I'm forcing myself to try to come up with something, as opposed to when it just relax and allow it to move through me, right? The inspiration. And so, I mean, I don't doubt like dreams. I mean, my dreams are so visceral. I can literally watch my dreams like movies. I wake up and I try to recount it. I'm like, wow, that was so elaborate. And I was so engaged. And I was so dramatically engaged. Like, this would make an amazing movie, but I don't even know how to articulate it now. It was so complicated, right?
Yeah.
So imagine if that's our dream state, then it's the same, who's imagining, who's creating those worlds in our dreams, right? Is that our brain just fantasizing these places that we've never seen before? I don't believe it's the brain. I think that the brain is more of a receiver. And look, I mean, one of the proofs is, for example, like we know that we can visualize things outside of our body. That's why people that have out of body experiences, also like astral projection, they're able to literally go and see things that can be proven to be physically there or physically accurate in a way that their eyes could not have seen. So something extrasensory is happening with our body, and our let's say our being has an extrasensory ability. So I think that applies certainly to our creative life force as well, that when we allow ourselves to relax and like channel information will come through. That's why we're able to have insights. I don't know that they talk about predictive programming as though it's always like some kind of secret society, some Mason is like writing the plot for humanity, right? I mean, you see things like hidden in Back to the Future. There's little 9/11 hints in Back to the Future.
That's one.
Oh yeah, video. Look at the video. Back to the Future predicts 9/11. There's multiple hints, and that's obviously just one of countless ones. Simpsons and you name it. Fox. I was thinking of Fox Mulder, the X-Files. They had an episode about the hijacking of the plane hitting the buildings and all this kind of stuff. And I don't think it's all conspiracy in the grand scheme of everyone's in on it. There could be people that know, but I think it's more likely that they're tuning in. And I think David Lynch he articulates a lot of these things. I mean, that's how he created, right? He worked with meditation and transcendental meditation states, and he created from that. I think that's really what the point of, how do you say? We are instruments.
Yeah.
Going back to like the idea of this is God's universe. We are instruments. And the more we can just relax and let go of the ego, we can unblock the messages, the visions, what the universe is trying to express through us.
I had written a crime thriller that was set in Vietnam, and I went to Vietnam for a while to write the script, and so I was there, and massages were like $5. So
yeah.
my writing process would be to go like look over my notes, think of the scene I was gonna write, and then go to to a massage and listen to some meditative music, and and just like kind of be in that half falling asleep state, but like they're someone's massaging you, so you're staying awake, and it would just I would just think of the scene, and it would just like come to me, and that was
Mm-hmm.
probably one of my favorite writing processes was being in that state. Yeah, so I
I
can
bet.
definitely.
I bet. Yeah, that's what do they call it? Somnambular? No, it's like an alpha state, I think, of the brain. It's
Mm,
oftentimes obviously there's like different depths of hypnotic states that our brain can go into, and that state between like sleep and wake, almost like a
yeah.
twilight zone.
Yep.
We get a lot of like it's like we're not asleep, but we are able to like start to have those visions and those dreamlike experiences. Daydreaming, right? That's almost
Yep.
is an expression of that.
Yeah. Have I'm sure you're familiar with Danny Goler, his laser experiments with the DMT. Have you heard? You haven't?
I
Oh,
feel like
wow.
I've heard the name, but I don't know anything about this though.
I was curious to see if you had done it, or because I really haven't used psychedelics at all, but his thing was that he had basically figured out that if you're on DMT and you look at a is it like a something to do with the laser when it's like refracted or whatever on a surface, you can see the code in the matrix, and everyone sees the same thing basically.
And what does it say?
Well, it's just code. Like no one can. It just looks like uh, you know, hieroglyphics or what. Like people have tried to write them out, and they're like it's nothing we've ever seen. But thousands of people have done it, and they've all seen the same thing. It's very interesting. I thought maybe it would be something you've looked into, or no.
Hmm.
Do you, so I guess that brings me to the like the Matrix. Do you think we're literally living in a world like that, or that the simulation theory, or what's your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a holographic simulation. It feels like an uh, it feels like an echo. You know, what we're living is like an echo of the first time or something. This is not the this is not the original world. We're living in something that's almost experimental slash educational. Um, right? It's a sim, yeah. And that's why it's like where our energy goes, our attention, our attention goes, our energy flows, and when you it's it's like whatever you're looking for, you're gonna find it. And so I think we're learning to become creators through this experience. We don't have the power yet to become creators, but that's why most of creation is still like it's guided, and a lot of it is referential and kind of mirroring of what others are doing. But finding our authenticity, our soul authenticity, I think that's the point of this simulation.
Hmm. Yeah, I can
Being able
kind of
to
see
work
that.
from that. That's our,
Yeah.
that's find our power and our authenticity, right? Our true sense of self, our voice, our actual, like our perspective, our sovereignty. That's the work. And it's very hard because it's so much victim mentality. So much victim mentality, as we said, like they, them is stopping me. They believe this, so I must believe it. They think this, so I must believe it. All of this herd mentality, getting back to the beginning of like the conversation, it's like that's all there to trick. That's all there to toy. That's all there to deflate you, to bring you down, to take away your true essence, which you already have it. You already are it before you start to think, before you start to look out at the world. It's already there. And then it's like, okay, can you maintain that through all the dream spells, through all the illusions, through all the games that are being played? Can you maintain your authenticity?
So if you think that, we're getting something creatively from outside, do you think that also some people in power who are there tricking people are also getting influence from some outside force, maybe an evil force,
Of course.
to trick
Of course.
us? Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Because God wears the mask of the devil. So it's going to use every trick in the book to figure out who you really are.
Sure.
And ultimately, you can lie to everyone, but it all starts with lying to yourself. So do you want to be authentic and actually like find out who you are? Or do you want to continue to play these games, lie to yourself, repeat, repeat, repeat until you find your authenticity?
Well, we only have a couple minutes left here, but I want to ask you two quick things, I guess. Where do you get your news? Like, if you're trying to get information of what's happening, do you trust anyone?
I don't really care.
Yeah.
I don't really care about what's happening. In a way, like I could say there's an interest, kind of like watching a movie, there's an interest, or like watching a show, there's an interest, right? Like, oh, what's going to happen next? But I work not to get overly engaged in that energy, right? So I literally just trust the universe is going to give me the information when it wants me to have it.
Interesting.
So if I open my X, it'll be like, oh, there's something on here. I might scroll through a little bit and then move on. Or I'll just see like, oh, Apple News, that's the headline. That's the headline. Okay, cool, move on. I just try to engage too much energy with interface with that.
Smart way to look at it. I have a hard time not engaging sometimes. It's like, especially when like my family's talking about it, or my dad will engage me with something, or my sister. It's like,
that's when you have to just find your authenticity and be like, does this really interest me or not?
yeah, getting it. It's hard when it's family.
What does it have to do with my life? I know, because ask them, what does this have to do with your life right now?
Then, lastly,
it's like watching a movie. It's like, oh, let's talk about the movie.
Yeah.
That was a good movie. I enjoyed it. I didn't like that character. I mean, that's all this is.
And lastly, what are you working on now? Where can people find your work, or what do you got going on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of doing some stuff privately right now, but I would say the most recent documentary, RFK Legacy, is out. The story basically of father-son, RFK father-son story.
Yep.
Very beautiful film, and we also dive into some heavy issues around like the assassination of RFK Sr. and the conspiracy to kill him. And then, I've got other projects that are on my website. It's all on seanstone.info website.
Cool.
So yeah, I would say like, my books, my docs, my offerings are all there. So that'd be a good place to interface.
Great. All right. Well, all great stuff. Thanks for joining me for today and putting up with my cold. Sorry. I've been coughing and sneezing. So, all right. Well, thanks a lot. I'll see you later.
You got it. Thanks, Frank.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.